What up, everyone? Back for another video. I told you, making this a weekly thing. So hopefully you saw my last video explaining the changes on the channel and what's soon to be coming. So I wanted to start this off with a quick review of a figure I picked up recently, and this is what we're going to be seeing mostly on the channel. But I wanted to go through the new reviewing process that I have. I've changed things up, thought things through, thought of a better way to review things, thought of a better way to give scores, so on and so forth. So, in the past, whenever I reviewed figures or statues or whatever, I always used like a 3 grading system, and that was the concept and design, the paint, the sculpt, and then an overall one. So I've kind of changed that up a little bit. The first score I'm going to give them, still the concept and design. I think that is an important thing, and essentially for those who haven't watched me before, what that is the translation of that character. Most of the things we see in statue form or collectibles, anime, whatever, is usually translated from 2-dimensional to 3-dimensional. So how well they do that? They have to design it in a 3-dimensional way from only looking at a 2D picture, which is very difficult to do. Very rarely are figures ever a 1-to-1 scale exact replica of that person or character. It just never really happens. It would have to be a real person, first of all, and you can't do that with 2-dimensional into 3-dimensional. So how well they design it to look. And sometimes it's vice versa. Sometimes it is a real person, but it's like turns into a pop figure. How well they designed it. Does it look like the person even though it's a small figure that's very basic? So that's the first score, concept and design, how well they translate it, how well they designed it, the layout of the figure, the pose, things like that. So the other scores I had were paint and sculpt, and honestly, I never really had too much to say about sculpt. It was just something that was just very briefly mentioned, so there's just not a lot to talk about. Paint is a big deal. Like I've had a lot of trouble with figures, and sorry, Wolf's right here, by the way, if you can't see him. He's having a chewy, so he's in the video. There was never that much to say about sculpt because it was pretty straightforward, and most of the time companies did a fine job of sculpting, so there wasn't much to talk about. Paint was a big deal. There's a lot of companies that do really shitty paint jobs that can't stand the lines or that don't paint at all. But I'm merging those into one category, and I'm going to call it execution. Execution is going to be the second score, and essentially that's all those things. The paint, the sculpt, the materials they use, basically how well they execute their concept or design. How well it's put together and how well it translates into real life. Because it's one thing to create a concept of a figure, it's another thing completely to actually pull it off, because materials come into play, sculpting comes into play, and when you're in an assembly line or however they make it, there's things that go wrong with paint and texture and color, all these things come up, so that score is just going to be execution. The third score we have, this is one that I'm kind of shocked I've never really put into the scoring process, and that's going to be price. What this figure costs. And because that is a big deal. I've mentioned it before, but never made it part of the scoring process. And that's a big deal because sometimes companies, they just charge too much. Or sometimes these companies don't charge enough, and they give you a really great price. Or the other option is maybe they're not sold in stores. Maybe the only way to get this figure is it's very collectible and you can only get it on eBay. What are people charging for it? What is it, the value of it, what you're going to have to pay to get it, and is it worth it to pay that amount? Because just because someone's paying it doesn't mean I want to pay that. So is the price that they're set, is it worth your time? Is it worth paying that amount? Lastly, the final score, and this is something new as well, is collectibility. Now, this may sound a lot like price. Price is part of it, but not everything. And this is one of the things that's most important about this value scoring system. Because the other things I've mentioned, you can judge for yourself. You can look at this figure and see how well it's designed. You can look at the paint job for yourself and judge it for yourself. You don't need me to do that. But things like collectability are the things that I have experience in. I've been collecting for over 30 years, and I haven't stopped a day in my life. Well, that's not true. I've taken breaks. But I've done it pretty much the entire time, and I have a myriad of experience. I have things that have gone up in value. I have things that have gone down in value. And although I'm not some sort of magical prophet that can predict the future, I have a good idea of when things are going to go up in value, when they're going to go down in value, and whether it's worth investing in. So this category could also be called investment if you want to think about it that way, but it's collectability. Because, you know, it's not important to everyone. Sometimes you just want it and you don't give a shit what it's worth or what you have to pay for it. But some people you do. For someone like me, you want to know if it's something you should be holding on to, because in a year it may not be relevant anymore. So you want to know, like, well, should I keep this because it's going to go up in value, or should I sell it because it's pretty much going to stay the same? And that's collectability. Where it's going to go value-wise. Is it going to be worth something, or is it just going to hold steady, or is it just something fun to have and it's never going to hold value? So that is the scoring system, and those are the 4 scores that will be considered into it. Now, keep in mind, I'm not saying that these all matter to every person. Like I said, the old scoring system, you may just care about how it looks. That's fine. You can take individual scores for what they are. So that being said, that's the new system, so now you know what each of them means. Now, on to the actual figure. What we're going to be reviewing today, if I can do this one-handed, this is the Quantum Mechanix Q Figure Max Elite of Sorcerer Mickey from Fantasia. So I'll try to post some better pictures of it. Maybe I'll post a video of it spinning. I haven't quite figured out how I'm going to display this, but for now I have this little ladder here so you can at least look at what I'm talking about. And I'll talk about this, and hopefully I can zoom in on some stuff and give you a better idea. So that's the figure we're talking about. Now, a little bit about Quantum Mechanix. I'm sure if you're watching my channel, you've heard of them, but if you're new to it, you may not have heard of them. The problem with this company, they're not super well known. It's not like they're brand new or anything. They've been around quite a while. Like, honestly, I think like 10 years or close to that. They've been around a few years, so they've been around the block, but they're not a household name. The average person wouldn't know what you're talking about when you say Quantum Mechanix. But like other companies like Funko, Funko is a household name. Everyone knows who Funko is. Everyone knows what Pops are. So they're just not getting enough notoriety. And part of the problem is they just don't put out a ton of products. So they put out some, but at the rate they're going, there's just not that many that get put out each year or even each month for them to really gain traction and make themselves known in the collectible world. Because anytime you go into a collectible shop, you're just bombarded by Funko stuff, and then there's other things that are there too, but they often don't get the credit they deserve. And I think Quantum Mechanix is one of them. I think this is a great company, and I've honestly never been disappointed with any of their products. They do a fantastic job, and they deserve much more credit than they're getting. They deserve more notoriety than they're getting. So that being said, that's the basis for that. Now, most of the things I care about for them are just their Q figures, the whole Q series. They've done a lot of other stuff. They've done replicas and things like that, prop replicas. I haven't really been too into it. They haven't been mind-blowing or anything like that. So I think they're focusing on this series. And what they have is the Q figure, or Q fig, and that's essentially one character just kind of by itself on a stand. And then they have the Q fig Max, where that's a little bit of a bigger diorama and sometimes often features like 2 characters. And then they have the Q fig Max Elite, which is like an entire scene, like the oversized big characters relative to like the 10-inch pop figures. And they often have a whole scene going on and feature bigger characters or multiple characters. This one has 4 different characters in a whole action scene. And they even go one step above that. They have one that they've released so far as I know. They may have released more, I'm just not up to date. And that's the Q Masters. Those are full-on statues. Those are the ones that are like 2 feet tall, that are relative to like Sideshow, full-on statues, very intricate, very detailed. They're not resin or stone or polystone or stone of any kind. They're still vinyl, but they're just much bigger, much more detailed, and much higher price point. So there's where their products are, and this is the Q Figure Max Elite. So this is the bigger one, and this is the one that's at a $50 price point. So, that all being said, let's get into the review process. The first score, the concept, and the design. I'm going to give this a 9 out of 10. They did this very well. Because like I said before, this movie was two-dimensional. It was a two-dimensional cartoon, and that's pretty much all there's been. There's been other companies that make 3D designs, but they have to make their own. And making something three-dimensional from a 2D picture is very difficult to do and doesn't always translate. But I feel like they did it very well. And they did an entire action scene here, which was also done very well. So I like the idea of it. I like the positioning of everything. I like the concept and idea behind it. I think it's done very well. Not perfect by any means, so there's always room for improvement, but I really like it, and the second I saw it, I knew I wanted it. So they sold me on it, so I'd say that deserves the 9 out of 10. Next, the execution, the paint, the sculpt, how well they executed it. I'm only going to give this, I'm giving this an 8.5 out of 10. Not as amazing, but still very high score. The sculpt on it is just fine. They have a lot of detail, even down to the broomsticks. You can see the wood grain on the broomsticks. So the sculpt is done very well. No complaints there. Not a complaint, but I would say they only got like a half a point off for the paint. Not because it's bad. They stayed well in the lines. And don't eat my napkin. Stop it. They stayed in the lines and all the paint's fine. The only critique I would have is just a little more paint is the only thing I would say. So there are some parts that are painted, like his face and like his gloves have paint on them, but there are parts that aren't painted that are just the colored vinyl or plastic or whatever you want to call it, where like some of these brown parts, the broomsticks, those are just the color of the vinyl. So they're just like dyed vinyl. There's no paint over it. And I think there's some parts that could have used a little more paint. For his coat, for example, if I'm not showing a picture, I'll hold it up. Can't see very well, it's not focusing. Hopefully I'm putting pictures up, and hopefully I found a good way to capture video. But the coat, his little sorcerer's coat, is just the solid red vinyl, and I feel like they could have added some paint to it, because the problem I've always had why I prefer painted over just colored plastic or colored vinyl is you can't show gradation in colored vinyl. When you have a colored piece of vinyl or plastic, it's a solid piece. Just like any like cement or something like that you mix together, the color becomes uniform and it doesn't show any gradation within that. Paint, however, like you can see even from far away, the white tips of this water, it's because they use the clear blue vinyl, but they painted the tips of it to show the gradation to make it look like realistic water. So that's the difference I mean. So there are parts where they did do that and it shows the gradation very well, but there are parts like on his coat that don't show it very well. It's just solid red, and I feel like they could have put some more paint into it and some little features like on the broomstick and the Brussels, little stuff like that where they could have added some paint to show some gradation and show some more depth. Not a bad thing, by the way. These are not complaints. These are just harsh critiques to give it a score. So I'm still very happy with it. They did a very good job, but there's just always room for improvement, and that's what I do about these videos. It's not just for the consumer. It's for the people making these products as well, to just give tips on things they could do better. I still love it. Great job. But little things like that would have made a big difference. So that's the execution. Next score is the price. I'm only giving this a 6 out of 10. The price point on this is $50, which I don't think is a bad price. I'm not going to go as far as to say like, oh, it's not worth it, don't buy it. But I will be honest, it is pushing it. It's pushing it a little bit. It's just getting close to... Hold on. Woof, quit it. Stop. Sorry. Lost my mouse. Gotta give Wolf his chewy. Okay, sorry. The $50 price point is just pushing it. It's just like, just barely... It's getting close to too expensive. So if something like this, if it were $30, I would say, brilliant, I love it, I'm going to get a bunch of them. If it were $40, it's like, okay, I might get one or two. Where it's at the $50 price point, it's like, okay, I can probably just get one of these. So I would have to look at all their products of the Elite Q-Fig Maxes and say, okay, I can probably just pick one of these. Not a bad thing. It's not like I'm not going to get it, but that limits on how much we're collecting. So to be relative, things like pop figures, they're $10 usually. They're obviously much, much lower in quality, so I'm not comparing the quality, but it's at a price point where you can say, like, even if you don't like it that much, you might still pick it up because you can just pick them up very easily that are very low price point. This is obviously much more intricate, so it's worth it, but you're just limited on how much you're going to get from that company. Now, this one at that $50 price point, I didn't buy this for myself, by the way. This is a Christmas gift, which I'm ecstatic to get, but I might not have gotten it at that price point. It's just, that's just a little bit much for the average working Joe to spend on Q-Fig Maxes. It's not outrageous, but you'd have to really like it to spend that price point. So this is not against the company. I realize that it probably does cost that much to make because it's very well done, but you know, it's just getting close to that very expensive point. So that's why I gave it a 6 out of 10. If it were possible, I'm sure the company would make them cheaper, so it just may not be possible. But you know, it's just something to consider. It's very hard to buy a lot of things at that price point. So unfortunately, 6 out of 10. Next, the collectibility. I'm only giving this a 7.5 out of 10, and here's why. So, like I said at the beginning of the video, quantum mechanics is just not very well known. Things that they have really haven't gone up in value since the day they started. Whereas I'll always relate it back to Funko because it's just an easy relative term because everyone knows what it is. So I apologize for talking about Funko that much. Not like I'm a huge fan, I'm not. It's just that it's easy to relate to something that everyone knows. So something like Funko, those things have skyrocketed in price, and almost everything they have that's pop related goes up significantly in value. Quantum mechanics, not so much. So they do go up in value, but not super significantly because, like I said, they're just not a household name. There's not a ton of people that are just like quantum heads that are all about quantum mechanics like there are for other companies. That may change though, and I hope it does because I said this at the beginning, they really do deserve more notoriety. They do a fantastic job and they deserve so much more credit than they're getting. So I hope there is more collectible value, but as it stands right now, and that's what I'm grading on, there's not a ton of it. The reason it even gets a 7.5, because if it was just a random quantum mechanics, it would get lower. The reason it gets a 7.5 is because it's Disney. Like, it doesn't matter who makes it. If it's Disney, it's almost guaranteed to go up in value. If it's good quality Disney, it'll go up in value. Like, doesn't matter who make it. I can make it, like myself, and it'll probably go up in value. It's just Disney is just very, very collectible. But that's most of where this score is coming from. Most of the quantum mechanics stuff does not go up significantly in value. Even their exclusives, like they kind of stay steady at value. Still worth it, but that's good because you can go back and collect old stuff. And there are some exceptions of things that have gone up significantly in price, but there's not people that are willing to pay that high of a value, so it doesn't drive up the price. And that's why, back to that pricing score, if people aren't willing to pay more, it doesn't drive up the price. And if people aren't willing to pay it, it's technically not worth anything. So collectability, 7.5 on that, and most of their other stuff is probably going to be a little lower. But again, hope that changes. So averaging that out, all the scores together, overall it gets a 7.75. Now, if you're going by the old system and you only care about the figure itself, you don't care about the future, you don't care about the value, that score will be an 8.75. So that's on the old system just based on the figure alone. But if you want to take everything into account, the price, the collectability, the future, 7.75. Still high, still good, still worth it. And my overall opinion on it is I do think it's worth it. I do think this is something collectible. I do think it's worth spending money on, but more specifically to this specific Disney character. So I do think it's worth it. I would have paid that much, and I think you should too. So that's my overall opinion. It gets a thumbs up. Spend your money on this. I would. And yeah, that's all I can say about it. At the end of the day, my scoring doesn't matter, but hopefully you take some of this advice into consideration. And this is how we'll score things in the future, so you have an idea of what to expect and where things are going to go. Do you need to get down? Okay, he's down. Whoops, gone. So that's the basic idea of it, and I hope this helps. So let me know what you think of the new scoring system. Does this help you? Are there more things you'd like to know about? Is there something you want to be mentioned that you think should be scored or part of the consideration? Are there things I've mentioned that you think shouldn't be part of it? Don't worry, no opinion is wrong. Your opinions are valued, so feel free to weigh in. And thank you for those who have weighed in so far. So that's the scoring on this. Once again, this was the Sorcerer Mickey Quantum Mechanics Q-Fig Max Elite from Fantasia. Lord, that's a mouthful. At a 7.75 overall score. Let me know what you think. And again, if there's something you'd like to see reviewed, if there's something you want to talk about, let me know in the comments. We'll make it happen. Once again, thank you all for watching and supporting. See you on the next video next week. Love you all. Peace.